broke his crown. Marceline takes Bonnibel to a dinner party with the Ice King, trying to convince PB that he's a sweet guy deep down. They arrive at his house, where PB's hesitant to relax at first when Ice King starts contorting and speaking in tongues, so she knocks him out to better study the crown. She can't make sense of the readings and decides to use VR to enter the crown itself, taking Marceline with her. They enter a sprawling maze, where Gunther shows them around while playing the bongos, letting them meet a few of the previous wearers of the crown, including the original Santa, before they find Simon Petrikov himself. After a reunion, they follow Gunther to the source of the crown's corruption, Magic Woman. Marcy and Bonnie try to capture this floating head for a while but fail, yet Simon recognizes her as Betty and attempts to just talk it out. This works, and Magic Woman becomes Betty for long enough to stabilize the maze as the others teleport back out to their world. Bonnibel reads normal data on the crown's output, though a trace of Betty's AI remains behind to talk with Simon again. Simon's mind has almost been completely taken over by the character of Ice King, and yet for all of this invasion, we see that this episode's presented the idea that there's a bit of Simon inside Ice King as well. Not only him, but every other person who's ever been attuned to the crown by putting it on, at least in this dimension. Betty has also inserted not herself but a version of herself into the crown that's able to make alterations to the code, determining how it works. In this way, Betty and Simon have reunited in a very roundabout manner, as he's able to talk to a version of her that exists from the present day as a version of himself from the past. Ice King may struggle to remember the people closest to him, but Simon recognizes Marceline right away, even apologizing to her for having their last sentient meeting together focus on someone else. So if the crown has worn Simon as much as Simon has worn the crown, then it follows that it now has Betty imprinted onto it, and the two are able to spend more time together. Ironic given that the other two are so much further apart in the land of Ooh, as they both continue to fall deeper into the madness and sadness spectrum of magic. It's a small victory to have them reunite, but a victory nonetheless. Don't look. Finn reads about Dead Mountain, and that there's a hermit you can't let look at you at the top, as well as a treasure that can change you into whatever you want. So they head out on the promise of wishes and fights, only to find a depressing yurt on the mountain with the shades-wearing skeleton lying there. Finn steals the skeleton's shades, only for his glowing eyes to knock out Finn. He wakes up at home, opening his eyes and transforming Jake into a varsity jacket bro, and turning Bimo into a tiny angel. They realize Finn is turning people into what he sees them as. Princess Bubblegum asks them for some help with a speech she's giving, as Ice King's been hanging out near the venue. But while shooing him away, Finn's glasses fall off, and he transforms Ice King into Simon, as well as PB into a tomboy. After returning home and accidentally turning Neptr into a microwave, Finn sees his own reflection, and turns himself into a monstrous version of his father. Jake then gathers the people he's turned up to that point as they try to improve Finn's self-image by having him look in a mirror while they describe him, with the friend description finally turning Finn back to himself. The magic eyes fall out and Neptr turns them into a pie as Bimo falls from the sky. Finn transforms the people he knows into forms that he sees based on personality. Jake turns into a large brother to represent the fact that he's acting like a big bro to Finn while he's out, and then he turns into an old man after saying something wise. Bimo turns into a literal angel, flying high enough to come crashing down when reality returns. Ice King turns into Simon, fitting as Finn hasn't really fought him in several seasons and he's been more of an annoying acquaintance. But in a more immediate sense, Starchy turns into an old-school burglar and then a butt when he makes a comment about it. And some of the changes are less positive, like Shelby being a stereotypical nerd and Neptr turning into an inanimate object because Finn forgets about him a lot. So Finn runs away to wait out the end of his cursed life in the yurt the same way that the original owner of the Magic Eyes did. He doesn't want to hurt people anymore because he thinks he's become the type of person who does that. But just because you temporarily have a strange perception of a person doesn't mean that you're bad for judging them. People are more than just one thing. Jake isn't only Finn's brother. Shelby's not just there to correct people. Bonnibel's not some romantically unavailable tomboy. It's even interesting that the people Finn transforms misinterpret their new body, like how Simon sees himself and only laments that he's lost his muscles. The person you are and the person other people see you as are not the same, as both of these are constantly fluctuating, and you really only have control over one. Beyond the Grotto. Finn can't sleep because their sea lard keeps climbing into his bed, so they toss it into the grotto outside the treehouse. Shelby warns them that sea lards are saltwater fish and the grotto is freshwater, so they dive in to save it. They resurface in a cavern beneath the ground, populated by the water nymphs who say that sea lards are mammals. They then chase this lard into a whirlpool where they're warned not to touch the purple stuff. They awaken in a dimension that's a bit like theirs, but with different brush strokes on the lines and colors to everything. They meet alternate versions of Lady, Marceline, and Ice King, the last of whom purples Finn and Jake until they begin to forget their mission and their names. The duo stumbles upon Bush Boots, who's missing her rolling pin, though this is actually the sea lard, and it runs off when they capture it. They chase after the sea lard until meeting B-Mo, who tells them a poem before the lard pushes them all into the grotto again. Finn and Jake return to their dimension, where Jake tells B-Mo all about the events of their grotto adventure, though they refuse to tell Ice King about it. The art style here is reminiscent of the Batman-Spider-Man short as it's made by the same couple, though the loosely flowing dialogue is explained not as something meant to match the visual aesthetic, but instead as an effect of the purple underneath the area beneath the grotto. As you go further down there and are exposed to the grotto world, you begin to forget who you are. Finn and Jake even forget their names and their mission to retrieve the sea lard. But just because a person has forgotten the details of who they are, some aspects of them will still remain. Just in the same way that Finn and Jake continue pursuing the sea lard by accident while trying to accomplish other goals, as they also keep trying to help people and save the day. Finn and Jake become boy and dog, but they still retain the heroism that made them into who they are. So Finn and Jake, and arguably anyone else, is less defined by what they say, but what they do, and what they do is defined by gut reactions and first impressions of the situation. Lady Rainicorn of the Crystal Dimension. Lady leaves the house to have lunch with Princess Bubblegum, leaving TV alone to make lunch for himself. He finds a secret compartment in the house with a crystal sandwich and he eats it, then leaves to sell the box it was in at the market. Lady finds out where he's gone and rushes to stop him, but TV's found by another Rainicorn named Lee first. Lee offers to take TV to the Crystal Dimension to sell it, running away from Lady as she pursues through her own portal. Lee takes TV to a house he's squatting in, where there's a TV-shaped centrifuge waiting there as a few dogs get called inside. Meanwhile, Lady is searching for Lee, finding some old graffiti he left and flashing back to her time with him as an anti-dog revolutionary who planned to steal the sandwich from a dog military base. Thinking this was a step too far, Lady stole the sandwich back from him and took it to Ooh, where she hid it in her house. Back in the present, Lee and his dog spin the sandwich out of TV and prepares to use it himself. Lady fights the dogs off with the newspaper but gets held by the energy coming out of Lee. TV's eventually able to shut the box with the crystal and Lee inside, but rather than going home with his mother, TV asks to stay in the Crystal Dimension to learn to be more independent, living with his grandparents instead. This episode is all about Lady and TV's relationship and the comparison they have to Lady and Lee from the past. Neither TV nor Lee have especially great teenage lives, but for opposite reasons, as TV's too lazy to work or do anything but play games all day, while Lee was far more active, but destructive in what he calls activism. Everybody wants their kid to grow up to make something, and their nightmare is that their child is either a rebel without a point, or a slob without a point. Lady's concern during this episode is that her son is going to go from one to the other, as she knows that Lee's a bad influence due to her personal experience where Lee was a bad influence on her. But the reason she's not anymore is because she was eventually able to see who he really was and put a stop to the plans he had involving the sandwich. The very same thing that TV does by the end of the episode when he shuts the box once more. So while TV ends the episode having hardly learned anything or changed at all, Lady's still able to rest easily, knowing that her son has at least the judgment to turn his life around should things get too bad. I am a sword. Finn drops the Finn sword off of a bridge while showing off tricks, and after spending the night searching for it, he and Jake give up. That night, Finn has a dream where he's robbing people, and he wakes up screaming to see that Jake has made him a new Finn sword. He tries using this one against Science Cat, but his heart's not in the fight. He tries to stay up the next night so he won't have another robbing dream, but he gets a vision of the bandit princess attacking the spiky people, and realizes that the Finn sword is sending him psychic messages. So he and Jake head out to the Spiky Kingdom, where they help the mayor reattach his head before pursuing the bandit princess to the Box Kingdom. Meanwhile, the Finn sword has been talking to the bandit princess about why she is making the sword do so many crimes, and she says she was born unloved and wants the Finn sword to forget having ever done a good deed. Finn arrives, ready to fight the bandit princess to get his sword back by using his grass sword, but she deflects a blow with the sword that makes Finn stab himself in the face. Jake takes Finn and the broken sword back to the treehouse where he hangs it on the mantle, and once they leave, it begins glowing. Finn loses a part of himself, though only in a literal sense, as the Finn sword was able to send him messages, and Finn still behaves as he did before, trying to stop bad people from doing bad things. And both of these facts still apply no matter which Finn you're talking about. The Finn inside of the sword just lost a part of himself when Finn stopped listening to his ideas and tossed him off a bridge, but this didn't stop him from sending psychic signals to save the day. The Finn sword isn't just a sword made out of a multiverse Finn, but a sword with the mind of a hero, who can offer a bit of internal reflection at a moment's notice. It's just a matter of Finn being able to be introspective or not that determines if he can maintain this level of heroism. This is then compared to so many callbacks, like Science Cat from My Two Favorite People, or the villagers from Gut Grinder and Box Sprints. Seeing these places again will bring the audience back to the Finn who first visited, like Finn entering the Spiky Kingdom in Gut Grinder to try to make things right with the group that was afraid of his brother, or a Finn who looks for a day to save even when things are going fine from Box Sprints. The natural heroism of Finn is compared to the bandit princess, as she uses her backstory to justify the heinous actions she performs, actively rejecting an opportunity to turn her life around. Bun Bun. Cinnamon Bun visits the Candy Kingdom on a diplomatic mission to deliver a Get Well Soon card to Princess Bubblegum to sign. While he's there, he catches up with a few old friends, who tease him for this clumsiness he used to have, and PB's inspired by seeing this exchange to create another candy person so Cinnamon Bun won't be so isolated. She makes Bun Bun, and tasks Finn with delivering her to the Flame Kingdom. Bun Bun receives a tour of the Flame Kingdom from Cinnamon Bun, though she keeps running around doing crazy antics that embarrass the knight. She eventually wanders into the room where the Flame King's being held, trying to make friends with him but freeing the guy instead. So CB and Bun Bun head out to try to capture him, seeing the Flame King in a cave where he's attempting to raise an army of chipmunks to attack the old kingdom. Bun Bun points out that the attack won't work, and he realizes that he's become rusty, so she instead suggests that he become the king of chipmunks and give up on his invasion. Back at the Flame Kingdom, Finn and Flame Princess have been catching up when CB returns, informing them that the Flame King is free but no longer a threat. Both Finn and Cinnamon Bun get an opportunity to go back to somewhere they've been before and have their current life compared to those old times. In both cases, the person they used to be is a person they're not proud of having been. For CB, he's reminded of a time where he was clumsy and easily to taken advantage of, literally being half-baked, and is upset to learn that many of the Candy Kingdom citizens still think of him that way, because he hasn't been around frequently enough to undo his reputation. But Cinnamon Bun also has Bun Bun with him, a candy person who has not been alive long enough to have ever known the old Cinnamon Bun, and yet was also made with the same old parts. She runs around doing hijinks and making a fool of herself and everyone around her, and yet she still ends up providing some value to the world by successfully shutting down the Flame King's return to conquer his lands. From this, Cinnamon Bun is able to learn to not be so ashamed of who he used to be, as someone just like him was able to still be a good person. Finn likewise is able to return to meet a person he once manipulated to offer a sincere apology, rather than the self-serving one he'd given before when they first broke up. In this instance, the distance between the two actually worked in Finn's favor, as it gave the Flame Princess time to re-evaluate her time with Finn and to judge him based on who he's become, rather than who she remembers him as. This is mirrored in the way that Flame Princess allows Flame King to go free, recognizing that her time locked away was traumatizing for her and would be traumatizing for anybody. So it's best to give people the ideal environment to live in for them to be the best version of themselves. Normal Man. Normal Man is guiding Tiny Manticore into space to rescue his brother Glob, who's orbiting Ooh. But instead of returning Glob to Normal Man, Tiny Manticore steals him as vengeance for the years he was held in Magic Man's house. So Normal Man goes to Finn and Jake's treehouse to ask for help, and despite knocking him out at first, they agree to save Magic Man's brother from the top of Wild Trap Mountain. On the way there, Normal Man reminisces on the jerk behavior Magic Man did and says he's saving his brother to undo some of that. Finn and Jake sneak through a series of wild traps before making it to the top, where Tiny Manticore knocks out Jake and later Finn with his boomerang. Normal Man's able to leap forward to grab his brother, as Tiny Manticore flies them higher and higher, eventually dropping them from a great height and watching them fall to their death. On the way down, Glob and Normal Man finally make their peace, and Tiny Manticore has a change of heart, saving them from the fall and taking them back to Magic Man's house. He's finally able to use the Martian transporter, though Glob bites his hand on the way up to force Normal Man to drop him. Normal Man arrives on Mars alone, where he's told to rid the planet of anarchy. Magic Man is now Normal Man, with all of his old jerkish behaviors being explained away as a result of his exposure to great magic. So now that his magical abilities are gone, he's become less of a jerk and gets to be normal again. The issue is that the effects of his magic powers are still persisting, and the people harmed by him still remember the bad times. So people like Tiny Manticore are trying to get revenge against a man who no longer exists. The only way to get him to stop seeking his revenge is to convince him of that fact. Normal Man's eventually able to save his brother by doing something Magic Man never would, or even think to do. Something selfless to save another person while getting nothing from it. And it isn't just Tiny Manticore who he proves he has changed to. Normal Man also wows his brother and the other Gob derivatives when he acts selflessly to rescue one of them twice. This is why, in the end, Glob is confident in sending Normal Man back to Mars to rule. His brother was not worthy of the position before, but has proven he's better now. It's just a matter of convincing the rest of the Martians that he's not the same guy as he was earlier. Elemental. All of the coat hangers in the Candy Kingdom have gone missing, and Finn and Jake are tasked with finding them. They learn Ice King stole them to fish his keys out of a crack in his house, and when they investigate what's in this crack, they discover a sphere of ice. Ice King cracks it open and reveals Patience St. Pym, the ice elemental, inside. She recruits the Ice King as her new protege, and tasks him with rounding up the princesses of other three elements, freezing Finn and Jake when they protest. Ice King flies out to capture these three princesses, bringing them back to his palace where she explains that they are the other three elementals like her. The four elementals have reincarnated over and over through history, with Patience detecting the Liches coming years ago in our world, where she froze herself to wait out the destruction, despite the others being unconcerned with the cycle. Now unfrozen, she tries to teach the others about their powers, but they reject these teachings as Flame Princess unthaws the rest, including Finn and Jake. They use Slime Princess to attach her to the wall before leaving, as Patience plots with Ice King to make her presence known to all the world. Much in the same way that Evergreen tried to prevent the Catalyst Comet from reincarnating all the other elementals, Patience St. Pym tried to avoid her fate and drag the others into doing the same, only to be met with indifference. Ice is a preservative. Things that are frozen can stay the same for a long time, and it makes sense that the personality of an ice elemental would want to avoid change. By having one's character behavior reference another one's, we can figure out their deal sooner and go straight into dynamics with the rest of the cast who, once more, really don't want to go along with whatever ice nonsense they're up to. And the nonsense she's up to involves trying to bring out the elemental abilities of the other, revealing that the normally science-headed PB can shoot jelly beans out of her hands. We already knew Flame Princess could, but what this episode really is doing is setting up later plotlines so they don't come out of nowhere. 5 short tables. Gunter has been messing with Ice King's Fiona and Cake fanfiction, so he gathers these scattered pages and remixes them together. The first remix is about Cake making flapjacks for the breakfast table that are meant to tell stories, though Fiona can't tell what any of them are supposed to be, so they leave to find some models to sculpt non-fictional flapjacks after. They first approach the Candy Kingdom, where Prince Gumball is digging through his books for the Candy Periodic Table. After researching a bit, he comes up with a new strategy for a board game he challenges Butterscotch Butler to. But Butterscotch Butler uses knowledge from Gumball's diary to win the match by knowing her opponent, and he reacts by throwing the game at the window. Seeking a more still subject, they head to Turtle Prince's library, where they see Flame Prince looking for a book to check out, accidentally setting fire to several along the way as Turtle Prince follows him, extinguishing fires as he goes. Flame Prince finds one he's interested in checking out, but Turtle Prince can't give this book to him because he keeps burning the table of contents, offering instead to read it aloud, before FP says he was only there for the bathroom. In the forest, Lumpy Space Prince is fleeing from Marshall Lee, who is trying to give him some cough syrup from a tablespoon. LSP keeps hiding, but Marshall Lee is able to fake an attack by a monster to lure him out, continuing to pretend he's about to die, so LSP will willingly take the syrup. Though after chugging a bit, he breaks out in more lumps, and Marshall Lee thinks that he might have got the wrong bottle. Ice President then reads their fanfiction story to Flynn the Person and Jocks the Raccoon, revealed as part of Ice Queen's fanfic she is reading to the penguins. But the penguins are more interested in the flapjacks that Cake is making for them. Ice Queen tries to attack them, but Cake makes Fiona a flapjack sword she deflects the attack with, topping off the fight with an Ice Queen flapjack. Back in the Ice Kingdom, Ice King finishes reading his short stories to the penguins. He connects all of these short stories with the table theme, and hearing how the word sounds, decides to label all short stories as Graybles, which blows Cuber's mind. The Music Hole. Finn is still bummed out about losing the Finn sword, and Jake's attempts to cheer him up are not working. So he and Princess Bubblegum get together for Plan C, revealed as a battle of the bands, with Finn as judge. The acts are Susan Strong, Flame Princess Ineptor, and Marceline's band, but she stops mid-song when she loses her pick, refusing to play until it's found. The gathered audience begins to riot as Marceline won't play, with the bouncer, Ice King, releasing the penguins into the crowd as control. PB finds Marcy's pick and she keeps playing, but the penguins continue the riot when they attack people during the song. During this lull in the music, Finn hears a song playing in the distance and he asks Jake and Lady to find it with him. They wander towards the noise until Finn nearly falls into a music hole, revealed to be a sentient pit as old as Ooh itself. She can only be heard by innocent children or people who have suffered a great loss. The music hole tells Finn that he should be grateful to exist in the presence of people in the moment, and, realizing this, he gives the crown to the winner of the Battle of the Bands, the music hole. Finn laments the loss of a part of himself, worrying those around him to the point that they have to come up with a plan to cheer him up with the power of music. This works for a while. The moments where Finn is surrounded by friends and loved ones show an exhausted smile, though at least he's able to lift his head up on his own. But this remedy is only a temporary fix. As soon as the music stops, he returns to the same funk from before. This isn't shown as a failure though. He wanders into the woods seeking out more music when he finds the music hole, and cheers up while singing with her. She's able to fix his mental issues, not with a song or a big performance, but by reminding him that there are so many other potential performances in the future as long as he has friends with him. Sure, the Battle of the Bands might just be a temporary distraction from the crushing loneliness that Finn's experiencing, but so's everything else he could be doing. You can think of life as a series of distractions, although this is a way of thinking that only aligns with the idea that there's a main point to life at all. If there is some deep meaning to life, then the random interests and get-togethers and hobbies you pursue are distractions. But in the much more likely event that we're all just here by chance and there is no goal, then the distractions are all we have and all there ever will be. If there's any reason for us to be on this planet, it's to mess around and sing songs and pet dogs and play with swords. Daddy-Daughter Card Wars. Jake, Charlie, and BMO are sailing in a boat as Charlie does a tarot reading of BMO only for Jake to pull out his old Card Wars box as he beckons one of the others to be his partner in an upcoming tournament. BMO jumps overboard rather than play, and Charlie only agrees to do this in exchange for one of Jake's bones. They arrive at the tourney where Jake introduces his daughter to several of his old acquaintances, staving off memories of rage quitting the game for good in his 20s. The duo plays their first game and easily wins, though Charlie leaves because she only agreed one bone for one game. So Jake stretches to fake still having a partner and continues to play, getting increasingly desperate and playing dirty in the later rounds. Meanwhile, Charlie's returned to her home in a pyramid where she uses the bone she got from Jake to perform a ritual that will allow her to see the following decades of her life. She sees several years of regrets and anxieties that don't clear up until her 90s, which she then fuses with. Now, with a 90-year-old's wisdom, Charlie realizes that she was ignoring her father and runs back to the tournament. She catches Jake in the middle of an argument with his 20-year-old self and calms him down, returning to the final match where they fight hard but still lose. Yet rather than smashing up the board like he always does, Jake offers a handshake, and then he returns to home to bury his 20s. Near the end of the episode, Charlie uses magic to see her future self, and watches a cycle of anxiety and poor life choices being made, only really getting herself together in her 90s as she only then has the maturity to accept her previous life choices. Considering Jake considers himself about late 30 to early 40-ish, he's not keeping track, this means that Charlie was able to see a version of herself older than her father, who still had issues to work out and problems to fix. In fact, she never really got over her issues, only accepted them. Given that context, she realizes that her father's not a perfect man, nobody is, and that growing up isn't something that happens all at once, but it's a slow and steady process. Jake is still fighting metaphorical demons from his past, and still trying to reconcile with the person he used to be. He drags his daughter to a card game tournament she has no interest in attending because of selfish reasons. This isn't the type of behavior from a cold, logical being who has everything figured out, but Charlie never even stops to consider the motivation behind his action. Nor does she ever bother to figure out if Jake himself is enjoying the game he's playing. As much as kids try to imagine that the adults in their lives are perfect people, this isn't true. They're just as capable of making mistakes as anybody, and still need help from those who are capable of offering it. Reboot. Finn, Jake, and Susan are going through some old human ruins when a machine comes out of the ground, with Tiffany revealed to be inside, now sporting a robotic arm. Tiffany tries to give them a tour, but Susan leads the way, somehow knowing where to go. They then meet with Dr. Gross, who shows off her menagerie of various animal hybrids before drugging Finn and Jake so she can operate on them, revealing herself to be a human with several cybernetic implants. Susan punches her out, grabbing the duo and running away, only to be captured by a net cannon when the hybrid animals are controlled into stopping them. Tiffany, seeing his sort of brother about to be dissected, stops Dr. Gross to give them time to leave the ship before it explodes, with Tiffany still aboard, and the animals all escaping. Reboot. Finn, Jake, and Susan are fighting a giant electric eel as it heads towards the Candy Kingdom. When Susan grabs it, it shocks her, reactivating the chip on her head and causing her to speak in a robotic voice, grabbing Finn and running off. Some of the banana guards show up to stop this eel, having to fight Susan instead. While she's attacking them, Princess Bubblegum grabs Finn and escapes to the Candy Kingdom with Susan in pursuit. PB tries convincing the Gumball Guardians not to be too rough in stopping her, though one blasts her with a laser anyway, only for Susan to absorb it and become more powerful. She destroys Rattleballs and hops by a now grown-up Sparkle before landing at the beach where she scans the horizon. Jake returns after having been tossed aside before, attempting to smash Susan's head with the mace. Finn climbs inside of the Jake suit, hoping to be more restrained in fighting, and then pushing her into the ocean. But she merely tosses a massive anchor at the duo, smashing Jake and knocking him out of the fight as Finn narrowly escapes. He apologizes to her before donning the broken Finn sword, hitting her on the head chip and breaking control over her. But the grass sword escapes Finn's hand and attacks, squeezing her as Finn tries to stop it. He punches the grass sword loose and it crawls towards the Finn sword, merging with it into the grass demon. This two-parter was sort of a season finale, made a bit more complicated by the fact that the intended airing order and the internal airing order and the actual airing order and re-released airing order were all kinda wonky. I'm putting it like halfway between two season endings here because the way I've been uploading individual seasons for this retrospective was mostly done out of convenience for myself, so I don't have to make any particularly long videos to upload early, not just for channel members, but more so to see if they get flagged by copyright, so I'll know more readily what to edit before the real video goes live. Finales usually wrap up plots, tying the story-heavy episodes of the last season together and delivering a proper conclusion to those narratives while also giving an initial idea of what threads will be carried over to the next season. But as the show has run on, the later season finales are less about wrapping things up than they are about opening new doors for narrative devices, mostly tying things together to evolve what's gone on before. This gives more of a binge-watching feeling to the show, where you're rewarded for paying careful attention to episodes and remembering specific devices and narrative meanings as you watch. For example, we've seen Susan and Finn's struggles to find another human living among them for several seasons, and yet, for all of this searching, they've never found a satisfactory result. Finn has managed to meet up with his father, but that was not a pleasant meeting, and Susan has never really cared for her original people because she found herself a happy home among the Butopians, themselves still wearing old human-like helmets to protect against a vampire threat that hasn't been around in centuries. And then they meet another human who wants to make them something more than human. The idea of an implant or artificial limb is something Finn isn't opposed to, he's basically had one for a few seasons already. But the idea of transhumanism is still rejected when Dr. Gross offers them augments to who they already are. The potential to be more than human is rejected in spite of Finn not having a lot of great experiences with humans. Susan similarly rejects the offer, though this is because she already has similar augmentations, and these cause her to go semi-berserk later in the two-parter. The ending to this episode is all about characters trying and failing to show restraint. Nobody wants to hurt Susan because they're aware that the behavior she's exhibiting is so unlike how she normally acts, there must be something wrong. And this is the right call. All of their restrained actions fail to stop her, but the actions of the Gumball Guardians without restraint only make the situation worse. It's a gentle tap from a broken sword that stops her from going crazy, saving Susan from the electronics on her head. Despite Finn being the one who was kidnapped, he was never concerned for himself, but for everyone else. Two Swords. Finn and Jake wake up in the hospital, where Finn recounts the events following the previous episode to Princess Bubblegum, as well as what happened after. The grass guy from before steps over to Susan, and Finn rushes over to stop him from hurting her. But soon Finn realizes this grass guy is trying to stop Finn from doing that as well. The two of them fight for a while over who the real Finn is until Jake comes to and calls him a grass demon, scaring the guy off. The grass guy, I'll start calling him Fern now, goes to the treehouse and begins awkwardly moving around and touching all their stuff. He goes through an old photo album where he recalls some of the events from the photos before flashing back to the events of I Am a Sword, where the grass sword broke off inside the Finn sword with a small grass demon taking over by spinning several webs. After this flashback, Fern starts growing distressed and smashing up the place, spilling syrup everywhere and scaring Bimo. Finn gets a call from Bimo and Jake overhears, rushing out to take care of it. Upon their return to the house, Jake tries to confront him, but Fern won't pay attention until Finn gets out a Finn cake. Fern takes this cake and sniffs it, realizing he's not really Finn but still kind of Finn, which causes them all to calm down. The argument starting this episode is between Finn and Fern over who the real Finn is. Earlier episodes have shown that the Finn sword is just as much a Finn as the original, or is potentially the real Finn with the copy being the one who wields it. Yet for all the debate over who the original clone is, the argument ends up not mattering. Grass Finn is a Finn, as much as Flesh Finn is a Finn. Just because your lived experience is more personal to you doesn't mean that other people's lived experiences don't matter. Everybody has an internal life exactly as deep as every other person, so of course we all consider ourselves the main characters of everything. Jake hates Fern at first for wrecking up the house and scaring Bimo, but Finn's done all of that already. So what difference is there that makes these two separate people? This comes down to the lived experiences they've had since they split up back in the time room. Fern is just Finn with 95% of the same memories, and it's the last 5% that make him unique. But there's a question of whether Finn's 5% is more legitimate or not that again goes unanswered because, to the two Finns, there's no such thing as an invalid life experience, just a different one. Do no harm. Finn wakes up feeling bummed out about the fact that Susan was hospitalized by his hand, and heads to the hospital to check on her. He leaves Jake and Fern alone, telling Jake to act as though Fern were Finn. Jake makes Finn's favorite foods, but Fern can't eat. He tries to get Fern to play the flute, but Fern can't breathe. Then he suggests that they go fight evil together, and Fern thinks of a place to go where they could find some evil. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Finn is seen apologizing to Susan by Dr. Princess, and when he says he'll do anything to help her out, she gives him her lab coat and tells him he's a doctor now. For a while, Finn enjoys playing doctor, as he pulls a thorn out of Mr. Fox's paw and fixes Ice King's back. His next plan is to drop a sword on Susan's head so her warrior instincts will kick in and she'll wake up, but this is stopped by Dr. Princess returning from her vacation, as well as Mr. Fox's hand being swollen and Ice King's back hurting more than before. Finn realizes he's not a real doctor, and leaves in time to see Jake and Fern entering with the unconscious body of the grass wizard, who Fern beat up with excessive force. As they're talking, Fern realizes he's not really Finn and gives himself the name Fern, the one I've been using already. Fern steals Crunchy's midlife crisis cycle and rides into the sunset. Back in the hospital, a ceiling fan blade falls towards Susan, but her warrior instincts stop it. Finn feels guilty about his loss of control and inability to prevent his grass sword from harming Susan during the events of Reboot. He winds up having the responsibilities of a doctor thrust upon him, though he takes to these new duties rather well, feeling good about himself because he's finally doing something that involves helping people instead of just hurting them. For so long, Finn has considered himself a hero, and heroes hurt people. This is supposed to be in defense of others, but it's nowhere near as direct a method of improving the world as undoing harm as a healer. He ultimately fails at this, though, as his healing methods all end up hurting people anyway, be it through negligence, like not disinfecting Mr. Fox's wound, or ineptitude, like assuming he can drop a sword on a coma patient to wake her up. Ignoring that this still worked, it was still a bad idea. This is then compared to Fern, who's like Finn in that all he knows is violence, but rather than this violence being viewed as an unfortunate source of goodness, it's an unfortunate source of wickedness. Fern attacks the monsters in the Grass Wizard's hedge maze, then beats up the wizard, even though he had plenty of chances to solve riddles or talk things out instead of fighting first. The fact that these characters are similar reinforces the idea that they're both Finn, but the methods they use to accomplish these similar goals are where they differ, and understanding this is what really makes Fern earn a unique name from his copy. Wheels. At the KKW Enterprises Picnicathlon, Kim Kil-won asks Jake for advice about his daughter Bronwyn, as she's been sleeping through school while her grades slip. Jake stakes out in the bushes near KKW's house to see Bronwyn sneaking out, following her to a skate park where all her friends are. Her friends meet Jake and think he's kind of lame, until he shows off his shape-shifting and skateboarding abilities, after which they change their mind. Jake begins to obsess over whether these teens think he's cool, returning with Finn the next night so they can beatbox. Bronwyn tries to join in with this music but chokes on a leaf instead, embarrassing her enough that she challenges Jake to a trash-off, where the loser will be banned from the skate park for life. They arrive at the skate park, with Jake showing off his pompadour before the race begins. It's neck and neck at first, but Bronwyn starts getting a lead, making the final jump only for Jake to mess up and fall down. Kim Kil-won then enters the park, apologizing to Bronwyn for sending Jake on his behalf instead of just talking to her, while the two make up. KKW accepting that he's not cool, but he's not uncool either. Jake's attempts to get to know Bronwyn better backfire when he tries too hard to connect, rolling over into being a better version of her and competing with his granddaughter for attention. Sure, all of these actions do end up making Jake a little bit more like Bronwyn, but they do nothing to make him understand her better, as they do nothing to make him understand himself too. Bronwyn's friends are shown as fickle, calling Jake an old man, but thinking he's neat after he does a few tricks. They like Bronwyn, but think she's lame, and then go back and forth based on arbitrary changing parameters in a moment's notice. Nothing is less cool than desperately trying to convince everybody else that you're cool. Likeable people don't have to fake it, and that desperation means you're faking it. Who is not faking it is Kim Kil-won, who genuinely wants to understand his daughter without trying to imitate her. Because people who are extremely different are still able to learn about one another. Mimicry is a poor way to connect. He made the mistake of sending someone else to learn about his daughter rather than asking her directly, but when he remedied that mistake, it came across as honest instead of perfect. High Strangeness. Tree Trunks is once again abducted by the aliens who take her every few years, where she meets her alien hybrid children. She tells Mr. Pig about this, and he assumes she was having a dream, asking Tree Trunks if she wants to see Princess Bubblegum's fireworks show the next day. At this show, Tree Trunks is once again abducted, and she sees PB's probes attacking and hurting her alien kids. Upon returning, Tree Trunks plans to protest against the secretive space program when she's scouted by Starchy, who takes her to a secret meeting of the Veritas Brigade. Here, Tree Trunks speaks to the gathered members and riles them up to attack the military base. Once inside, she finds the tiny candy people in one of the probes and starts to destroy them, though she's caught by Princess Bubblegum and the Banana Guards. While everybody's being arrested, TT and PB are abducted again, where the princess finally sees the destruction her probes are causing. She undoes the invasion and the probes return to the capsule, as the two women are transported back to Oo. Princess Bubblegum says she was only sending out probes to start a new candy kingdom among the stars in case Oo's destroyed, an event she says is very likely. And Tree Trunks agrees to use her alien connections to find them a new place. Nobody believes Tree Trunks when she claims that there are aliens abducting her, and each person she informs has a slightly different reaction. From Mr. Pig, who thinks of it as a harmless fantasy, to the candy citizens who just think she's gone nuts. Her delusions are dismissed because they don't affect anyone who hears them. But they're not delusions, and the two groups who do believe her also have different reactions. Princess Bubblegum considers her knowledge to be dangerous, in large part because she assumes that Tree Trunks does not understand the space program to the same degree she does. And then the Veritas Brigade considers her knowledge dangerous, but they think it's dangerous to the right people. The truth is that everyone here is acting in what they think is their best interest. Princess Bubblegum is trying to create a backup plan for the Candy Kingdom should Ooh be destroyed again. And she's unaware that the probes she's sending out are in any way destructive because she's only focusing on the people on the ground. Tree Trunks is trying to save children no one thinks she has, inadvertently ruining the chances of saving the Candy Kingdom in a worst-case scenario to do so. Even the Veritas Brigade, often considered delusional, is concerned about the secrecy of PB's fireworks shows. In the end, it matters far more why someone is trying to do the right thing than what it is they're doing, from less valid, like trying to feel like they're correct, to the more valid of saving lives, be they closely related or vast in number. Horse and Ball. James Baxter arrives to cheer up a group of somber molemen, but while dancing on his ball it pops, and he falls to the floor. Beemo and Jake head to the Rag and Bone Kingdom to find a patch for the iconic beach ball, where they meet Raggedy Princess, who tells them that anything can be found in her kingdom, though she keeps a pristine beach ball to herself. Finn is in the treehouse caring for James while trying to act normal at Shelby's advice, something Finn struggles to do as he views James Baxter as a celebrity. James Baxter, meanwhile, is flashing back to his old life in a horse city, working a dead-end horse job. He has enough of this life and throws all his money away, discovering a cave with his original beach ball and a crying bat. James starts dancing on this ball, cheering the bat up while mispronouncing games and bookstore to form his catchphrase. He then spreads joy around to others, except the original bat, who flies off when his attention drifts. Jake and Beemo give up on finding a beach ball, only for Raggedy Princess to finally learn they're searching for a ball for an artist, and she gives them tons of rubber balls. They take these balls back to the tree house, only to see James Baxter ignoring them after a pep talk from Finn. James Baxter walks into the sunset dancing while chanting his name, finally performing For Himself Alone. The last James Baxter episode took a look behind the scenes by peeling back the third wall, not the fourth wall which separates the audience from the work, but the third that separates the work from its creators. James Baxter tried to figure out the exact mechanisms of how to entertain through sight and sound, as that's the role an animator plays in the creation of art. Here, we get a glimpse behind the scenes into why an animator might want to do that, and what they're throwing away as well as gaining to do this. James Baxter does not want to work a boring desk job like everyone else, so he throws out the trappings of that old life and discovers a way to bring joy to people around him, because that's more satisfying than a spreadsheet. But as he starts performing for more and more people, he leaves behind the personal touches that made the bat cheer up in the first place. His act is now more about broad appeal than a single member of the audience. There's always a desire for an artist to reach as many people as possible and to sand off the edges of their work, as though thousands of intrigued people are better than dozens of tantalized ones. But when he loses his ability to perform for others, this leaves James Baxter with the shocking realization that all of his work was never for himself. Without a ball to dance on top of, what did he really have? In spite of the nobility of his goal, he didn't really obtain anything from the recognition. It isn't until Finn personally told him how much his work meant that he realizes it doesn't matter if he can entertain forever, because the works will outlast him. So with this, James Baxter's finally able to dance for himself, however temporary that may be, because that's all we have. Jelly beans have power. Slime Princess is showing off the slime powers Patient St. Pim gave her all those episodes ago, with Princess Bubblegum getting jealous enough to return to her lab to try to come up with some sort of sciencey way to make her powers manifest. She fails at this, but that night gets a symbol on a paper airplane thrown through the window that causes her to meet with Chatsberry, the candy elemental from the time of Evergreen. He shows her a few candy reactions before helping her to unlock the ability to shoot jelly beans. PB shows this off the next day, but resents that she can only shoot jelly beans and nothing else. And then the Candy Kingdom is attacked by a flying fortune teller. PB tries to take out the fortune teller with jelly beans, but they're only deflected back at the candy people. She then has another vision of Chatsberry, where he tries to get her to visualize more reactions. PB's then able to imagine the molecular structure of individual pieces of candy, producing soda and mints to create an explosion that takes out the fortune teller as it breaks into snow that falls on the kingdom. It's then revealed that these paper airplanes and fortune tellers were all sent by patient St. Pim, still living in Ice King's basement. Princess Bubblegum has dealt with the science versus magic argument before in the episode Wizards Only Fools, where she has to make the argument that any sufficiently unexplained science is usually just explained away as magic. Here, she starts to doubt herself, as Slime Princess gets real magical powers and shows them off. This doesn't only make Princess Bubblegum jealous, but it flies in the face of her whole character by suggesting that there are mysteries too unexplainable for her to master. She attempts several times to scientifically measure her budding magical abilities to no success, only able to open up her mind to more jelly beans with some sort of transportation to an inner dimension. And even here, she eschews things like deep interdimensional knowledge in favor of a realistically educated guess. She gets vindicated in the end though, as her knowledge of chemical properties allows her to quickly master the new magic because it's nothing more than another way of mastering science and thus something learnable. But instead of reinforcing her belief system, it contradicts it. Princess Bubblegum is not only a scientist, but a leader as well, and her experimentation and new powers end up hurting her own citizens because she fails to control the candy she creates. Science is supposed to be measurable, understandable, and consistent, and she was reckless and emotional during her fight against patient St. Pim, getting her people hurt. Island Recap. The Invitation. A foreign ship arrives on the shores of Oo, searching for XJ77. It neutralizes Mindy Candy people along its path towards the kingdom, where Finn and Jake try to fight it. But the ship stops short of attacking Finn as it recognizes him as a human, and then Jake smashes it up. Bemo's able to get some readouts from it, discovering the ship was searching for Susan Strong, who's still recovering in the hospital nearby. Finn brings her to the ship, which Jake and PB are working on, though because it's too damaged to fly anymore, they simply take some printouts of its missions through Bemo, and plan to take Princess Bubblegum's boat to its destination. Finn tells Fern to watch over the treehouse while he's gone, and Jake says his goodbyes to his children, while Lady asks him to bring back souvenirs. While the ship is being loaded, Princess Bubblegum asks Finn to be careful, as finding more humans might be heavy business, but he assures her he'll be fine before they sail off. Whipple the Happy Dragon. Finn, Jake, and Susan are sailing on the HMS Sugar Spit, with Jake using a sextant to navigate to their destination. They sail past several strange sights before seeing a dragon being chased by sailors. Finn wants to save the dragon, but Susan and Jake outvote him. Not that it matters, as the dragon makes a whirlpool, sinking the other ship and damaging theirs. This dragon, introduced as Whipple, apologizes for the damage and offers to push them to their destination. But while navigating, he tells rambling, boring stories, eventually getting offended when Bemo, the stowaway, bursts out and tells him to shut up. Whipple destroys their boat, making Jake be the boat instead, and they use Bemo to navigate through the waters. But Jake keeps trying to go off course because he hallucinates seeing his parents in a bundle of seaweed, caused by poisonous jellyfish attached to the hull. Finn and Susan punch these jellyfish away, though one sticks to Susan's head, making her hallucinate a childhood friend before Finn can remove it. Finn tries to reassure the others to keep going because he needs closure on where he's from, and then Whipple emerges from the water, saying he overheard the entire thing, and he offers to simply blow them there directly. He does this, but they're stopped by the Colossus of the Deep, who breaks their boat. Mysterious Island. Finn washes up on an island only to immediately be hit by a tidal wave. He climbs up to a snowy area with several cabins that he climbs inside of to find seed packets and warmer clothing. But as soon as he dons this new outfit, the weather rapidly turns and he starts to overheat, learning that the weather on the island has localized seasons that behave erratically. He stumbles upon an animal in a trap, and when he tries to free it, gets caught in a trap himself, where he meets a bear and an old woman who drag him back to a treehouse. This woman goes through Finn's backpack, throwing several things around before seeing a sketchbook with a drawing of Jake, asking him to draw her as well, despite his lacking artistic abilities. A heavy storm comes by and they take cover inside of a tree, which is reinforced with high-tech equipment. The woman takes him to an underground room full of junk, where she shows him a video of several humans on the island, not only revealing her name is Alva, but that all the other humans living there were wiped out by a series of disasters. The storm lets up and they search for Finn's hound friend, in the same cove Finn washed up on fighting crabs. Alva draws them a map showing multiple islands as they plan to head to the others to look for her. Meanwhile, Bimo is being served Finn cakes on the moon. Imaginary resources. Finn and Jake are riding a giant parrot to the next island, which is made entirely of artificial material. Jake takes an egg with him as they search the island for Bimo, discovering them in a virtual reality store with the headset on. Finn and Jake put on headsets of their own, creating new avatars and entering a virtual world. Once here, they get called system dumps by everyone else around them, and the angry mob requests a mod to ban them. This mod arrives, revealed to be Bimo, and Bimo bans the mob instead, taking Finn and Jake to another location where they learn Bimo's in charge of everything due to running a popular dance club. Bimo announces that they're going to stay in this world instead of traveling with the others, so Jake leaves the VR world to rip off Bimo's headset. It's protected by an electrical shock though, so he looks for the main server, which he then smashes up. This causes the server to shut down, and the humans inside of the escapism room leave their pods, weakly attacking Finn and Jake. Finn decides to fix the servers because Bimo is crying, though neither of them knows how to do this. Bimo instead fixes up some of the robots maintaining the servers, who then do the rest of the work, and the humans return to the pod. They prepare to say goodbye to Bimo, but Bimo can't stand to leave them, and decides to go with the others, as the robots have prepared a chute to take them to the next island. Jake's egg hatches a baby parrot, and they go. Hide and seek. Susan is wandering around an island, flashing back to her old life there. She recalls lessons she was taught as a child about the Founders, who brought humanity back from near extinction by settling these islands, and how they are assigned jobs like the educators, such as Dr. Gross, and seekers. Susan, named Kara in the past, was in training to be a seeker and tasked with hunting down hiders, the people who tried to flee the island. One of these hiders is Martin Mertens, who was injured during a hunt by Kara and taken to Dr. Minerva in the healing wing. The next night, Kara and her friend Frida sit on the roof, wondering about life outside the island, an idea that Kara dismisses because it's not part of her education. But later Kara sees Frida trying to flee, hiding in a cave where she has a transport mostly constructed, only needing the engine to finish. Kara asks her teacher Dr. Gross about whether the hiders are wrong, but doesn't get a satisfactory answer. She finds an engine for Frida's boat and delivers it, only to have been followed there by Dr. Gross, who uses the chip in her head to forcibly destroy this boat and retrieve Frida, ripping off her hat in the process. Back in the present, Finn, Jake, and Bimo have been following Susan as she retraces her steps, eventually winding up back on the beach, where she digs up Frida's old hat before telling them her name is Kara. Min and Marty. Kara takes Finn and Jake to a boat under the island so she can take Finn to meet his mother, Minerva. The episode flashes back to her nearly running over a jaywalking Martin, who's on his way to meet up with two hiders trying to flee in exchange for gadgets. Martin's been promising people ways off the island in exchange for these gadgets and then calling the seekers on them to get a double reward. But when a woman with a tiger demands he joins them on an escape, he winds up getting caught by Susan from last episode and dropped off at the hospital with Minerva as his doctor. Martin tries to sweet-talk her, and then tries escaping only to get injured in the attempt, forcing her to monitor him overnight. He pretends to be pathetic, so she won't let him get taken to re-education, and the two go out to dinner that night instead. Over a montage, the two live together and have a child, who they name Finn. One day, while Minerva's at work, the Tiger Woman returns and attacks Martin, so he takes Finn and flees, trying to hide out on a raft until the search is over. But the Colossus of the Deep, meant to stop people from escaping, attacks the two during a storm and nearly sinks the boat. So Martin attacks the Colossus himself, breaking its eye and shutting it down with the ensuing tidal wave pushing Finn's raft out to sea, as Martin is lost too. Minerva sits on the beach, wondering why Martin would take Finn and then leave her behind. Helpers. Kara takes Finn and Jake to the Founders Island, where Finn finally meets with a colony of humans for the first time. Kara wants them to be subtle, but Jake immediately makes a scene by asking around for Minerva, who allegedly everybody knows. Finn finally meets Minerva, telling her about himself, though he only gets short, simple answers. Kara sees Frida nearby and leaves the gathered crowd to pursue her, only to stop outside a toy store because she's unsure whether to re-enter her old friend's life. When people find out Jake can shapeshift, they call him a mutant, and several Minervas arrive to sedate Finn and Jake. They're taken to a prison cell where the two have electrodes in their heads preventing them from fighting back, but when a blood sample is taken from Finn, the Minervas all pause what they're doing to take him and Jake to a central room where Minerva appears on a screen. She explains that after Martin left her, she told Dr. Gross, who sent Kara after her, though they never got any word back from her and gave up on the search. Minerva grew sicker and sicker, retreating to her room as Dr. Gross's experiments grew out of control, until her lab leaked a virus that wiped out a majority of the island's population, as well as nearly all of the doctors. Minerva alone survived, but unable to help anybody, she uploaded herself into a series of Minerva bots, who proceed to help people for her. The Light Cloud. Finn is shown a simulation of what will happen if he tries to leave the island, the Guardian destroying his boat. Minerva tries to convince him to stay for the rest of his life, but he refuses, saying he's made plenty of great memories back in Oo, even though it was dangerous. He tries showing Minerva the memories of this danger, but she's horrified by these thoughts, trying to get him into a pod like her forever. But Finn leaves, saying he's going to escape anyway, and convince all the other humans to go with him. Meanwhile, Kara is talking to Frida about her goals from before, to escape the island and see the world. But Frida says she's learned to stop dreaming of a better life and that she prefers to stay put instead. Kara takes Frida outside where Finn is trying to convince the people to leave, and she, like the others, gets drawn in by his words. Hearing these words, Minerva grows concerned that people are going to rush into danger, so she attempts to shield the island in a dome to download their consciousnesses, terrifying the people. Finn pleads with her to stop, saying he'll stay if she promises not to control everyone in this way, and he also offers his memories of the times he's helped people himself. She realizes that Finn has become a helper just like her, and calls off the dome, reluctantly agreeing to let the people leave if they choose to do so. Finn and Jake get on a boat to leave, but the gathered crowd is unsure about actually going along with him and decide against it, save for Frida and Kara, who decides she prefers the name Susan. They take on the Colossus by using a fake boat to draw its attention before Finn dives into the eye socket that Martin broke years ago to attach a device that's used to place Minerva's mind inside to shut it off. The real Finn and Jake head out as Susan and Frida fly elsewhere, with Finn using virtual reality to say one last goodbye to his mother. Oo is far larger than the human islands and has far more in terms of available opportunities and adventures. This is something the Islands miniseries doesn't have to touch on too much because it's what we've seen 8 seasons of. It's also very perceptibly larger than the islands, so it has more opportunities for the above. And yet, the humans never leave the islands due to a perceived danger. They've created a giant colossus to trap them on the island, intended to serve as a test of sorts to see who can leave. Anybody capable of slipping by is strong enough to survive whatever dangers are out there. And sure, this is true. We know multiple humans who live outside of the islands, and they're all very tough. But we've also seen that these same humans were sunk by the Colossus as well. The barrier to exit is far more dangerous than anything out there. This raises the question of why it's even necessary to be tough. Sure, having the strength to survive in an unforgiving world is important, but there are plenty of citizens of the Candy Kingdom and such who would never survive in the dangers of the sea. Even Finn spent a long time terrified of the ocean, and he's the hero others call on for help all the time. There's a point to be made that not everybody has to be tough and strong, and in fact, the entire point of a society is that some people are not. At least, not strong in the sense that they fight sea monsters and giants. A healthy society has a variety of people with their own strengths and weaknesses, some more than others, and instead of trying to value a people by the weakest links among them, you ought to instead consider the value of a people as intrinsic to being alive. Trying to assign value to a person based on arbitrary measurement will always reduce that person's value because you're ignoring so much else about them. The sea is trapping humans on their islands, but it's safer to say that the humans are trapping themselves more than that. Most of their blocks towards leaving the islands or improving their lives are mental because they fear that change might be more negative than positive. And they're right about this. The island is somewhat of a paradise, just not one they're allowed to leave. The option to leave would prevent the paradise from functioning, and they need every person to reinforce it. Just one loose end like Martin weakens the fabric of their whole society, so they try all they can to stop him and stop those like him. And this is the ultimate weakness that faces humanity, the fact that they stop the Hiders despite the Hiders being the only ones to challenge the status quo. To quote John Quincy Adams, "I must study politics and war, so that my sons may study mathematics and diplomacy. My sons must study mathematics and diplomacy, so that their sons may study poetry, painting, and song." Those who cannot survive against the dangers of the world are considered weak by a society that only values survival over thriving. And challenging this idea is what would make that society grow to the point where they finally do get to thrive. There will be growing pains, but there are growing pains for everything worth doing. And some of the characters in this miniseries have first-hand experience with this already. Minerva's not only a helper, as in the classification, but she is the helper on the island, a position she got because of traumas that happened in her past. Ironically, these traumas made her weaker, and she recessed into her room, shielding her from a pandemic that wiped out so many others. If Minerva had never lost anybody, then it's likely that humanity outside of Ooo, which isn't supposed to exist, would have been wiped out. It was this hardship that made life better for everybody else, despite it being something she would never wish on anybody else. This is the irony of her character, that she's personally fallen in love with the person who opposed the society she was raised in and found happiness with the man. And then she underwent a great loss, which saved her life in a roundabout way. She's repeatedly made the best of bad situations and come out stronger because of it, only to prevent the same from happening to other people. Sure, it's reasonable to undergo some kind of suffering and then to react by trying to prevent anybody else from undergoing the same bad experience again. But there's a difference between trying to stop people from hurting themselves and forcing people not to hurt themselves. So long as people are given the choice whether to face hardship or not, then they really have freedom. And better than that, the potential for greatness. But greatness is not all that can be achieved with this extra sense of freedom. Martin has been presented as a con man since his early years, facilitating both escapes and captures of escapees. In the future, he's still a con man hurting those around him, and all of this is because he has the freedom not only to risk harm to himself, but to inflict harm onto others. Freedom can cut both ways like this, but that doesn't mean it's a net negative. It's only as good as the people helping are, and it's only as bad as the people hurting are. But Martin was not always a hurter, in the opposite sense as Minerva being a helper. He's shown to have mellowed out during his time with Minerva, even being a good father to Finn, as his priority when in danger is to get his son to safety before even leaving a note for his wife. For a brief moment of his life, one can imagine Martin as a good person, which is a shock since we see where he ended up. An optimist might interpret all of his heinous behavior as a reaction to his loss. He had a son and loved him, then he lost his son due to a failure to prevent his old life from catching up. After years of scams and imprisonment in the Citadel, Martin believed that he deserved his life on the lam, and then he met his son again, not thinking he deserved to be in Finn's life anymore. He wasn't running away from responsibility, but because he thought his presence in his son's life was a negative thing. But Martin himself has also contradicted this reading. If he really wanted to scare off his own son for Finn's benefit, he would have had more opportunity to let him know before. Instead, the chance Martin had to tell Finn the story of how he was lost was embellished to make him look good. Sure, he attacked the Colossus himself to defend his son, but the details he left out are more telling about his true intentions. But Finn and Martin still have one key thing in common. They both reject the isolation and repetition and safety of life on the island. Martin was always a rebel against authority, while Finn also went against his own mother as soon as he realized the control she exhibited on the world. It's interesting that Minerva had this level of repression as a response to Martin disappearing, overreacting to his personality by enforcing the opposite. And for all the Finn fear has had over becoming more like his father, seeing the opposite of Martin's personality expressed as social policy, he leans into the few good traits of the man. So why bother with all this programming in the first place when the great people are the ones who so vehemently oppose it? Dr. Gross made the argument that once people are strong enough to bypass the Colossus, they'll be strong enough to survive anything. So one can imagine that these draconian restrictions are in place because they're meant to be something for people to push back against. And yet, the harder they're pushed back against, the stronger the seeker they send. For this interpretation, the runs in charge do a lot to maintain the status quo, so it's hard to imagine that these rules were implemented specifically to be broken. And it's not like Finn always breaks rules either. He's been a knight for the Candy Kingdom before, and he served the interest of monarchies because he considered those rulers to have the best interests of their people at heart. Maybe that's all that matters. He agrees with the helpers of the world when they're helping, and he fights back if they're not. Maybe Martin thought he was doing the right thing, but Finn knew he wasn't. Maybe Minerva thought she was doing the right thing, but Finn knew she wasn't. And maybe Kara thought she was doing the right thing too, but Susan knew she wasn't.